This is the Reluctantly Independent podcast, and this is my chat with Ted Smith, Victoria-based cannabis activist and politician. Alright, so I'd like to talk to you about your thoughts regarding the upcoming legalization of cannabis in Canada, and a bit about your upcoming run for City Council. But would you be able to start by just giving us a little rundown of your history as a cannabis activist in Victoria?
Oh, gee. Okay. Well, it's hard to do a little one. I talk a lot.
Sure. No, go for it as much as you like.
Of work. But I guess I kind of started in Vancouver in '95. I came across a group called Hempology 101 that did education and activism. And I thought that I needed to tell the story of the plant and write a book about it. And Vancouver wasn't my scene, so I moved over to Victoria and started a club up at UVic and began writing the book, which finally got published in a real book format in 2012. Mm-hmm. Hempology 101, The History and Uses of Cannabis Sativa. And so, I started that route in September '95 in Victoria, and at the time, the medical uses of cannabis were really just starting to become known. And I met a baker, and we founded the Victoria Cannabis Buyers Club in January '96. I lived in a van and got a pager and a pamphlet and started to distribute cannabis from there. So I got an apartment and then a store in, I guess, 2001. I guess I got arrested giving out cookies downtown and passing out joints up at UVic where we had a club. And that actually only made me more popular. And then I got the store. And then we went through, I guess, 4 raids in 2002, 2003. It came on pretty hard and fast, but we stayed open every single day. And eventually, we beat all the charges laid against us. And then, I guess in 2009, our bakery got raided with Owen Smith working, and we took that case to the Supreme Court of Canada. In 2015, we won a unanimous decision at the Supreme Court of Canada that made extracts legal for patients across Canada, which is by far the most significant impact I've had in this work. And I taught lectures for 9 years up at UVic. I also published the Cannabis Digest newspaper for several years there. A couple other things along the way.
Cool. Yeah, very cool. And I noticed recently here in Victoria, and I think the entire Capital Regional District, as far as I know, that edible cannabis products have been banned by the Vancouver Island's Health Authority. And I was wondering how the Victoria Cannabis Buyers Club has been dealing with this ban.
Yeah, dispensary, maybe 2 years ago now. Or no, maybe it was just last year, a year and a half ago. Mm-hmm. A dispensary in Victoria was reported to VHA, and they jumped on this for the first time and issued warnings to everyone to take these products off the shelf. I think most dispensaries did, with the exception of Leaf Compassion, and I understand that they actually have been raided by VHA and their products destroyed. Mm-hmm. But the Buyers Club has defied this order, and we've continued to provide cookies and other edibles as we have for decades.
Okay, and how has the city been reacting to this?
Well, the city is in an interesting position itself. The mayor and council have no authority over VHA. Mm-hmm. Few people have authority over VHA. So they're kind of an interesting branch of the government in a sense.
Right.
And so I think it's more, that we've been lucky not to draw their attention. Our products are, good, consistent products, and our members responsible with them. And so, I think that's what has kept us out of their radar more than anything.
Right.
And the city would, mayor and council are pretty strong supporters of us. They would, I think, do anything in their power, but they can't even stop their own bylaw officers at times. The law is the law.
Right. And I also noticed that the City Council in Victoria recently gave the okay for a pilot project related to cannabis consumption sites in the city. And I was wondering if you know what this project's going to entail at this point?
Well, it's pretty awesome what's been going on. I guess, backing up a bit, when these bylaws were brought in 2 years ago, initially the council tried to put in a clause that would give exemptions to the 2 old compassion clubs to have consumption on site. For different reasons, those bylaws didn't get through third reading. They got to second reading, and a bunch of us thought that it was going to happen, but then it just stalled in the bureaucracy. And so we have for years advocated to council the need for our room, and they're quite aware of it. We've luckily, dodged the bylaw officer at times and haven't been fined, although we could be. And so, we've been lucky in that aspect. And this summer, I guess Trees Dispensary sort of joined the conversation. And in studying the regulations of the province and the Capital Region District, which has also passed its own smoking bylaw, it appears as though there's an opening where most of the rules are about workplace safety and not having employees subjected to secondhand smoke. And so a pilot project that the city is going to consider and moving on. The staff are writing the initial process of it now. The pilot project is going to be for an outdoor smoking facility where the patrons have to go through an indoor room or more, where the staff will sell them food and drink, likely, and then they'll go into the back courtyard where there wouldn't be staff. So it wouldn't likely be in the downtown. It's quite likely that Trees will partner with the city. They've got half a dozen licenses or something now anyway, and they're keen to invest in whatever it takes to see this done. Now, from our club's perspective, we have a safe consumption site, we call it, but it is indoors, and it is something that we intend upon staying medical in this transition and not become part of the whole recreational system for the time being. And so to do a pilot project with the city, they want to do something that's recreational and open to the public and much larger than our little room. And so we're very happy to have this other pilot project be the first that the city works with. We've also asked the city, though, to include in the staff report other potential pilot projects, an indoor facility like ours being one, or another one is possibly even a church where there wouldn't be any employees. We want to put all the cards on the table to see, what is possible here in order to have a facility where people can consume in a safe manner, in a manner that isn't bothering, non-smokers or anyone in the public that doesn't want to smell it or be near that. We can have them in filtered locations. It's ironic for us that in our rezoning hearing in January, we actually had our neighbors in the condo next door up in arms because we didn't actually put a sign up until just before the zoning hearing. And there's a marijuana across the street that had been zoned, and the condo owners were really upset that a second dispensary was going to be zoned next door to them. And when they found out that we had not only been selling cannabis there since 2001, but that we actually had a room for smoking it there, and they had no idea of our existence. And we've got like a number of letters written to City Hall about, why is there another dispensary starting now? And
Okay.
we're like, actually, we've been hotboxing this little place for years. And so that actually worked in our favor, and we'll continue to use that as proof of how well maintained their facility is, both for the smoke and its effect on the neighborhood, but also in terms of the public, I guess, perspective that there may be problems with security and other issues with the patrons of these smoking facilities. We've never had to call the police. Actually, the only time we've even had a fight in our smoking room, it was two employees. The only physical altercation, which was broken up very quickly, but
Right.
still, it's something that, in many ways, people's perspective of this is tied into what they think alcohol is. And they worry that, people are going to, be rowdy or, somehow be a public nuisance when, we've proven time and time again that not to be the case.
Right. And how did the city respond to your suggestion of using a place like a church as a cannabis consumption site, just out of curiosity?
Fair enough. It's one of those things, actually, it started as a joke. But now the more we look at it, the more it's like, actually, this might be a realistic option for us to do,
Right.
For a few reasons. And I brought it up in such a serious manner that I think the council, took it. There wasn't really much laughing. They're like, yeah, that's going to happen.
All right. So they're taking it pretty
We're going
seriously.
to find ways around the law to smoke cannabis in public.
Right.
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 And the arguments for the use of cannabis when it was illegal as a religious use failed because prohibition trumped it all.
Right.
But now that doesn't stand, and so there's not even an argument about whether we can use it religiously. It's just where we can use it religiously.
Right.
And there's no doubt that we can create our own sanctuaries and use the protections of religious law to do a number of different things. We could even potentially open up a charity branch that does palliative care for cancer patients and stuff, and gives them or cannabis medicines in their end of life. And we could do that through a church.
Right.
So there's actually some really serious thought towards this now, and I think actually council could see that we're going to do this one way or another here.
Right. Yeah. I mean, yeah, for me personally, it's like, limiting licenses for places like this is just kind of an example of the overreach of government, and it's just going to lead to people consuming elsewhere anyway, and they'll probably be consuming in places that the government is going to deem it to be prohibited, right? So it's a whole new set of problems are arising out of this. Also, I read the article that you wrote for Cannabis Digest recently, and I was curious about one of the requests or demands or whatever that you had for our local MLA. You stated that vertical integration between micro-producers, micro-processors, and stores must be allowed so that the club can have a kitchen and control its grow facilities. Could you expand on that a little bit?
Certainly. The rules as they're written are really intended to stop licensed producers, called LPs, from owning stores so that they don't have the ability to push their product. And so there's a number of rules that they've written, like the LPs aren't allowed to buy furniture with their logo on it and stuff like that,
right,
and give it to stores. Just a whole bunch of things that, for whatever reasons, they think will, not push cannabis on people. So, and Carol James brought these up as somehow being safeguards that we should be happy for.
Right.
But what it means for us, is that if we were able to license our bakery, which would be under a microprocessing license, there is a wall between our bakery and our club that wouldn't allow our club to sell our own cookies. The bakery, the way that the system's going to be working here is all these licensed producers and processors have to sell to the provincial government, and then the retailers purchase off of the province. And moreover, they've said that if that the facilities, that the processing and production facilities, cannot own and control a store. And that, again, that store cannot, if they do own a store, I think they're allowed to own the store, but they just cannot sell any of their own products out of that store.
Okay.
So everybody else would be able to sell our cookies but us.
Oh, wow. Okay. So,
and with our growers, right now we've got this network of really small ma-and-pa growers that our members have used, in some cases, their medicine for decades.
mm-hmm.
We literally have a grower who's within a couple months going to be at 20 years. He's grown for medicine for our club. And so, not the same strain, but still, it's something that, we've got these long-term relationships with people that honestly don't have it in them to go through all the paperwork and licensing and get their own little micro business going. So what we intend on doing is getting a micro production license for our club, and or multiple licenses, and we would rent the grow facilities and production facility, micro bakery, and then hire people to run them, and then all of that medicine would be grown by our long-term growers for our club, and we would likely have to purchase some more from the province on top of that.
Mm-hmm.
But it seems absurd that, again, we wouldn't be allowed, even if our growers did get these micro licenses, unless they did it on their own, we wouldn't be allowed to purchase from them. That our club somehow cannot own and control its own grow facilities is absurd.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that sounds pretty crazy to me. So what I gather is just like every element of the industry is just really segregated at the moment, and it seems really unnecessary, right? Like it's
mm-hmm.
too many regulations at the end of the day, as far as I can tell.
Yeah, it's hyper-regulated.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I understand that you and Dana Larson are going to be putting on an event at the BC legislature on the day that legalization goes into effect. And I'm assuming this is going to be like equal parts celebration and protest. Is that right?
Yes, I'm pretty excited about this. I've worked with Dana for decades, on and off. And this will be the largest 420 on Vancouver Island in its history. I have no doubt of that. And so, yeah, it'll be a big celebration, in particular at 420. Victoria will have seen nothing like this, I can assure you.
Right. Do you have any specific plans for the event?
Well, we're just going to be there for 3 hours,
mm-hmm.
ranting most of the time, because there are so many nuances of these laws that are really terrible. We do have a DJ, so there will be some dancing and celebration, to be sure. We're going to be shutting down our club for that 3 hours. Everyone's so uncertain of what's going to happen October 17th that I don't want to be at the legislature while the authorities are at the club in any way. So
right.
We're just going to shut down for the afternoon and then open back up for the evening, and actually going to keep it open a little later than normal just to add to the party-like atmosphere, I guess.
Right.
But yeah, it's something that in a lot of ways it's a really huge day. It's the biggest day of my life, I would say, aside from my birth. But in other ways, it's the beginning of Prohibition 2.0 here. So
mm-hmm.
I'm not done yet.
Yeah, well, I'm looking forward to the event. I'll be there for sure. So you're not just a cannabis activist, you're a hopeful politician as well now. So I was wondering what led you to decide to run for the city council in Victoria this year?
Well, I guess it's a number of things. Certainly what's happening with the legalization of cannabis, both with our club and at large, is very important to me, and it's important to see that it's done right. And how it's happened has been quite fast and dramatic, and there's all sorts of problems that need to be worked out. And I think that as a city councillor, I will certainly be able to help that conversation a lot more. But there's also, obviously a lot of other problems in the world. And when I started this work 2 decades ago, I knew full well that. And I had, in the initial years, done some other advocacy work. But eventually, by the turn of the century, I really just focused on the herb. And it's progressed significantly. In fact, last year, I tried to, just step away from the movement and let things run its course and do other things with my life. But I came back to it for the club because it was actually not in a good state without me. And I actually wouldn't be a cannabis activist at all if the club had been able to survive on its own. But that wasn't the case. So now that the club is getting back on its feet, even despite these huge changes that are coming, I feel that we've really laid the groundwork here, and now is the time for me to really step up to the plate and take my really unique experience, not only in this field but in life, I think, and help direct council and the city in a better way to manage its resources. I've been going to council meetings for months now since I've made my decision, and while the councillors themselves are all intelligent and kind and thoughtful people, at times they haven't made very wise decisions, in my opinion, and I think that I could help in conversations, everything from crystal pool to bike lanes and affordable housing, and so I think I've got some really good ideas, and that I'll be an excellent contribution to the city as a councillor. So, cool. Yeah, it's exciting for me.
Yeah, for sure. And I noticed on your social media posts that you're hoping to create a rapid transit system in Victoria and fight for better health care for the most marginalized and demand environmentally friendly building practices. And I know it's early days for you yet, but are you able to elaborate on how you would hope to do this and maybe where you think the money should ideally come from for these projects?
Sure. In fact, this weekend I'm going to be nailing down most of my housing platform, because it really is the most critical issue for the city. Mm-hmm. And so I think I have an interesting, and it's not my idea for sure. Few things are anyone's ideas, but anyhow, I want to promote a high density housing along a rapid transit corridor along Douglas Street from basically I think it's the Caledonia the police station's on, mm-hmm. Out towards Saanich. That there's that area, and they're doing a lot now for buses, but eventually I believe there'll be some rapid transit going up and down the Douglas corridor here. And that's something that certainly I want to push for. But what we need to do is take all these like industrial buildings and commercial buildings that are just typically 1 or 2 stories, like there's blocks of them along there. And we need a mix of commercial, residential, retail residential there with, some nice like 15, 20-story buildings with community amendments around them. And the reason this isn't being done is because the community plan doesn't allow for these really, tall buildings. And they're starting to let them happen in the downtown core. But there's this corridor that they do not allow buildings. I forget what it is exactly. It might be just like 4 or 5 stories. Like they don't allow like the real high density structures that, the developers would be there if we were, making room for such things. The money's there, but the rules aren't allowing for it. And just like we see in Vancouver along the Cambie, strip, or whatever you call it, on Cannabis Street, with the addition of the rapid transit, we're seeing a lot of infill of people mm-hmm. that don't need vehicles that can live along this transit corridor. And there's I think that would solve our housing problems, and with that infill, it would justify the rapid transit that we all so desperately want.
Mm-hmm. And do you think the money should come from like a shift in tax resources, or do you think higher taxes would be required for something like this?
I don't think we'd need more taxes. No, I think that if we allowed for the density, the developers would come. There's cranes all over Victoria.
Mm-hmm.
People are so the developers are there. They're it's just their hands are tied along that corridor that everyone's calling for rapid transit in. So it really doesn't make any sense to have restricted density in the rapid transit corridor.
Right. And I'm wondering, what are your thoughts on the role of charity versus the role of government in for situations like this? Like, is one or the other more important to you, or are they of equal importance?
Well, certainly there's roles for both. I'm a strong advocate for nonprofit societies doing work, and it's generally called a community economic development, where you have nonprofits like Women in Need, where they provide employment and retail and business environments for the general public, but they also have social programs and goals. And so I really like nonprofits. Charities have their purpose. However, there may be on a national level or provincial level, but like on a large scale, a need to create some type of crown corporation or expand in some of the powers already existing to work on the homelessness issue. This particular issue about building high density in the rapid transit corridor, like that doesn't need public money. There's money to be made here. Developers will do it, and so that's different than tent cities and dealing with the poorest of the poor. They can't even afford to rent, or don't want to, or would destroy it if they did get something. Like there's so much issues with mental health and addiction on our streets right now that it requires some real shifting in our thinking, and the private sector isn't going to provide housing for this segment of society that's now really entrenched, and we need to come up with some ways of managing tent cities type structures, or parking lots where people with vehicles can plug in and stay for the night, or different scenarios that aren't going to be done by a corporation. They're just not. There's little incentive, and the landlord tenancy rules just actually, in some sense, for landlords became even more strict. So to rent to people that are in such a desperate state is unrealistic, and we need to come up with some better approaches to help the most hurting people out there get back, as most of them would like to. But there's just so little resources and such a poor understanding of who they are and from decision makers. And this is one of the things that I think I can bring to not just council but higher levels of government, is that I haven't been an addict or really desperately poor like many people that I know and love, but I have seen them and know much of their experience through working with them for decades. And I think that when it comes to approaching some of these subjects, I will be able to help guide decision makers in ways that without that perspective, they may not realize how in some cases absurd their rules are, and in other cases how much better things could be if they're done with some more forethought. So I'm really feeling a powerful urge to represent those people that again are so disenfranchised that they often don't even vote, but they are the ones that are are both in the most need, and at times, sucking up our resources as a community with the emergency resources and such that would be much better spent somewhere else. So, it would not only benefit our bottom line to do this kind of work better, but it would make everyone feel safer and live in a better community. So, yeah, it's like I say, running for city council is really something that I feel like I've worked my whole life towards.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I really wish you all the best in your run. And before we wrap it up, I was just wondering if we could just touch on an issue that's made the news a little bit recently, in regards to removing the statue of Canada's first Prime Minister from the steps of City Hall. And I was just wondering what your thoughts were on the removal of the statue.
Well, to be clear, it's temporarily not in the public. It just weren't wise enough to secure its future home before taking it away. And so, the mayor and council have all agreed that it's going to go somewhere. But, some media and others have suggested it's gone and buried. The council decided a year ago that this was going to happen. I think it would have took a phone call to the museum to secure that as the place where it belonged. It doesn't belong in anywhere else that would be seen as an act of reverence. It belongs in the museum with a nice big plaque with all the atrocities. They didn't let the Chinese vote, all sorts of stuff, good and bad. Put it there in the museum. First thing people see, our first prime minister was a racist. There it is. But by not having done that simple step before taking it away, the council have shot themselves in the foot here. It's become an international incident. Although in some ways it's actually brought up all this, dirty past that most people have buried long ago. So it's, really helped, people gain an understanding of residential schools and some of the other atrocities that were committed by our government. So it kind of had some good effects, but really, if they would have just said it was going to the museum from the beginning, it wouldn't have caused the furor that it has.
Right. And like, given the reaction by some members of the public, do you think that the public should have been given a say? Like, do you think it's an issue that should have been debated any more than it was?
I obviously think that the process was flawed here. Even some of the councillors were surprised at how rushed that it suddenly became. And so, I think everyone, but a handful that were behind this decision are upset at the process. Mm-hmm. And so it definitely could have been done better. But honestly, I think that there would have been no furor about the process if they would have made a complete decision instead of this half-assed decision that's caused them so much headache. If they had in private decided that it was going to the museum where it rightfully belongs, I don't think it would have caused an issue at all. People wouldn't have blinked an eye. Most people didn't even know the statue was there.
Right. Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Cool. All right, man. Well, I think that's awesome. I don't want to take up too much of your time. I think that's probably a good place to wrap it up.
You're not taking up my time. You're helping me, buddy.
Oh, hey, sure. Well, you're helping me too. But yeah, man, that was great.
That works great then, doesn't it?
Yeah, for sure. I really appreciate it, man. I admire your work a lot, and I wish you all the best in your run for council.
Thank you very much, David. Thank you very much.